Chronicles of the Essence Guard, The Repository of Whispers in Time, by Eric Cockrell and Chuck Pino. Read by Rachel Marie Edwards. 8594 BC, Adheryelon. The scent of smoke engulfed Bindish's senses as he navigated the decaying arched hallways of the temple. Adheryelon, formerly a metropolis of glistening towers and vibrant machinery, now stood in devastation. As he moved, Bindish grasped a large crate brimming with scrolls, maps, schematics, and whatever else he could get his hands on. Although he had managed to recover little, he took whatever he could find. As the tremors intensified, he knew he had to act quickly. The elders had entrusted him with a sacred duty, to preserve their knowledge and carry the legacy of Adheryelon into an uncertain future. He took the sprawling hallways one step at a time, leaping over the falling mud and fissures in the earth. He heard the cries of his fellow citizens as they drowned out the city's devastation, a bitter chorus of loss. He reached the room where the city's engineers were hammering away at the temporal portals. Only one was still open, its metallic-like surface bubbling with pure power. It was his only escape. This one connects to the island south of the Great Sea, an exhausted engineer said, pointing at the vortex before them. The elders speak of an ancient library deep in the rainforest. If true, this could be the best place for your mission. As Bindish approached the portal, shouting caught his attention below. A party of men were advancing on a dagger-wielding man. At once, the man turned and took the three children he appeared to be protecting by the hands, and they were gone in a flash of light and rumbling wind. He witnessed several other strange warriors rift in and out, their movements swift and deliberate. They appeared to be rescuing civilians and disappearing through portals. The world faded into a mirage as Bindish entered the portal with renewed purpose. He owed it to his fellow men and to these strangers who would sacrifice their own lives to save his people. Kaya swept through the devastation and crowds, sword at her side as she dodged stone and other debris. The heroic warriors of Adheryelon were now a mess, trying to figure out their roles. She'd been assigned to protect the High Priestess, but she was gone now. With no superiors to tell her otherwise, Kaya reverted to her secondary mission of protecting the Adheryelon legacy. She raced down the crumbling streets, death's cries in her ears. As she approached the hall, she could already see that it was in ruins. Desperation clawed at her. Was this the end? Had all their knowledge and all of the history of Adheryelon been doomed? Just as she gave up, a flash of light appeared. One portal remained, though unstable. She had to trust that Bindish would find her and begin the one mission they hoped to never have to partake in. Ilara walked through the burning streets of collapsed columns, her lungs filled with the dust of her civilization, and her eyes irritated. The fear in the tone of everyone she passed only amplified her anxiety. Her voice, the voice of a mother in distress, shouted, "Drew! Reek! Flora! Where are you?" She had last seen them in the gardens, laughing among the most fragrant flowers. Now the gardens were nothing more than dust and stones, the flowers black with rotting leaves. She searched every square inch. She did not see her children, only the bitter and eerie silence of their absence. Ilara kept going, her bare feet treading the broken rubble. She pushed over collapsed stone steps, snuck through cracks, and waded through pools of water. All the crumbling structures, all the broken windows, were pierced by the nagging cry. "Where are my children?" She made her way to their favorite playground, once the place where children laughed with delight. But now it was wrecked, the various structures and implements almost unrecognizable. A tear trickled from her eye as she picked up a small painted wooden bird. It was Flora's favorite. Despair was about to swallow her, but there was some ray of light. They might have been in a nearby house. Maybe they'd run to safety. She recalled the portals, the exits that would take people from one place to another, and even into time itself. Could they have found one? Are they out there somewhere, just waiting for her? Ilara walked through the falling city, following the signs that pointed toward the Hall of the Essence. As she approached, all she could see was destruction. The hall was devastated. The doors opened. The last sparks of the essence stood before her in the form of one remaining portal. Before taking a step, Alara whispered a prayer to the ancients. There was no fear on her face as she entered, only the thought of reuniting with her children. With a flash, Bindish appeared in a grove of swaying palm trees on the edge of the savannah. He breathed in and out, the air thankfully clear and fresh, a welcome change from the destruction he left behind. He found himself alone. Moments later, Kaya came out of a shimmering portal near Bindish, her hand immediately moving to her sword. Nearly broken, Alara's eyes filled with desperation. She fell out of a dying portal and onto the soft, tall grass. "My children," she wept. Bindish approached her hesitantly. He recalled what he'd seen at the portal, the one rescuer with the children. Could it be? "High Priestess," he said softly. "I am almost certain I witnessed a guardian of the essence come to the aid of your children and whisk them to safety." Alara blinked, eyes watering. "Please, call me Ilara. Are you sure you saw them? Truly?" Bindish nodded, his demeanor heavy with belief. "I did, and I sincerely believe they were being rescued. There is hope that you may see them again. But regardless, it is now our duty to preserve our culture for the good of all humanity. Will you join us? My name is Bindish, and the quiet one over there is Kaya." Hope sprang to Alara's eyes. She rose. "Thank you. You are right, Bindish. I will not let grief swallow me. I will fight for their future." Kaya, who had been watching the scene mutely, came forward. "Hello, High Priestess. I was recently part of your guard and was sure that we lost you under the rubble of the city. I'm relieved to see you stand before me. Bindish and I seek the Library of the Ages." Alara offered as much of a smile as she could find and replied, "Then that is my mission as well, and please do call me Alara." With renewed purpose and some fragments of mutual optimism, Adheryelon's 3 survivors took their first steps into an uncertain future. Those first days were a flurry of deprivation and confusion. The humidity of the unforgiving sun, the sounds of insects all around them, and the shuffle of the tall grass they pushed aside filled in the long gaps between conversations. They shared water and the little bit of fruit they could trust, but their stomachs ached with misery. As hard as it was, Bindish kept moving, keeping his thoughts on the old maps and charts he was carrying in the crate. He knew from reports that somewhere there was an outpost deep in this rainforest, a refuge for the wandering Zenata. The seafaring Adheryelonians traded with the Zenata for goods and information on both sides of the Great Sea. Bindish prayed that despite the loss of their kingdom, this ancient pact would still be honored, and that the Zenata would offer them shelter and some comfort. Azalai, ancient Mauritania, Africa. On the 4th day, as the sun beat down on their weary bodies, they trudged across the endless plain, throat parched, legs heavy. Just as despair began to creep into their hearts, they saw it, a sight that made their blood run cold. A colossal beast, its fur a thick brown matted mess, strode across the horizon. Its tusks, curved and massive, gleamed in the sunlight. But what astounded them were the figures atop its back. Cloaked in furs and armed with strange tools, they rode the creature with a surprising ease. Bindish had never seen such a thing, a creature of myth, a beast of burden, tamed and controlled by the Zenata people. Fear and wonder battled within him as he watched them pass, a testament to the power of man and beast. Beyond the wandering beasts sat a group of tents near a small pond, flames coming from a fire in the center. Another group of large mammoths sat between the tents surrounding the fire. Despite the potential for danger, the group ran, their hearts beating fast with anticipation. As they approached, people sprang from the tents, They were tall and thin, copper-skinned with dark eyes. They had simple clothes, their hair filled with twisted braids. The sound of children laughing hung high around the camp, but they halted as they saw the foreigners approach. Kaya, ever careful, walked over, her hand on the blade. Bindish and Alara followed. "Hello there," Bindish called out, mixing the Adheryelon dialect with what he knew of the Zenata language, with some success. "The Zenata have been friends to our people in the past. We are refugees from Adheryelon looking for safety and direction." A woman stepped forward, her face ablaze with the wisdom of the ages. She peered at them with keen eyes, assessing their exhausted bodies and meager belongings. "Hello, friends," she said, singing gently. "We are indeed the Zenata. Welcome to Azalai, the land of tall grass and rock. What brings you to our modest paradise?" Bindish bowed his head respectfully. "We are the Adheryelon." He said this with pride and sadness in his voice. "Our city is no more, and we seek to preserve our civilization. We could use some assistance." The woman's eyes widened. "Adheryelon?" she echoed. "The people of the sea?" "The prophecy says—" "The prophecies are real," Bindish interrupted. "Our city has fallen, and there is nothing left but us, for now. As far as we know, we are all that remains." Silence fell upon the oasis as the Zenata absorbed this information. "Come," she said as she gestured toward the tents. "Rest and replenish yourselves. We accept you as kin and will share what we have with you for nothing more than your companionship." And they did as promised. The Zenata were eager to welcome the Adheryelon survivors. They provided them with water from their well, fruit from their plantations, and a place to sleep in their tents. The children were naturally drawn to Alara, their eyes watching her strange clothes and the intricate letters painted on the crate. They sat for a meal before Bindish left to speak to the elder Zenata. They warned him of spirits of the plains and other peoples he should be wary of, and he spoke of Adheryelon, its technologies, and its destruction. Kaya identified with the hunters from Zenata. They told her about their bows and arrows, how they tracked prey, and the secrets of the savannah. Kaya demonstrated her sword work, her moves swift and exact, and she won the admiration of the master hunters. Alara, still grieving, took comfort in the Zenata women. They stood with her, soft voices and kind eyes, trying to do something good for her broken heart. They spoke of their loss and struggles, and insisted that humans continue against all odds. Alara, for her part, talked about her children in a voice full of tears, to which the women responded with understanding and reassurance. By the time the night fell, Bindish, Kaya, and Alara were fully integrated into the Zenata. But as the sun rose, the mission was back on the group's minds. Bindish, Kaya, and Alara were ready to go. "Here is to your safe travel," said the Zenata elder, with a rich voice. "May you find what you need, and long live Adheryelon." Refreshed and with a newfound perspective, the trio set out into the fields of Azalai for the last leg of its journey toward the Library of the Ages. It was days, then weeks, as they traveled the harsh terrain. They walked through dangerous ravines with blowing winds and up sheer cliffs out to the horizon. They had lived through dust storms that blocked the sun for days and left them freezing at night. But they never gave up. They fought through it all with great purpose. Kaya slowed as the sun began to drop below the horizon, and the sky dissolved into burnt orange and violet. She lifted her hand, motioning to the others to halt. "See that?" she said, her voice just loud enough above the hum of wind to be heard. Bindish and Alara looked after her. Beyond them was a stone embankment, its silhouette crisp in the sunset. Upon the top, they saw a matrix of symbols, a seemingly stylized astronomical chart, and lines that appeared to imitate the motions of planets. "The Library of the Ages," Bindish spoke as he read. "The repository of whispers in time. We have found it." They charged forward with more excitement than ever. It was real. As they approached, the library's grandeur became apparent. It was no cave or chamber of the unknown, but a complex cut into the side of the cliff. The entrance, a stone hall equipped with the inscription, stood still and formidable in front of them. But it was sealed with a complex system of chained pinions and signs, a silent watchdog against the unknowable who came to inquire. Benish went to the switch, touching the symbols he recognized. He worked the gears one by one, matching them with the constellations on the rock. Kaya and Alara waited, their hopes and fears merging. A dull hum cut through the valley, and the last gear moved. The huge stone door cracked and slid into the darkened entrance to the library. The air was cool and dry, filling the area with the smell of old parchment and dust. Bindish, Kaya, and Alara looked at each other with wonder and dread. They had come to the end, to this hall of wisdom. They breathed in unison as they crossed the threshold, their hearts racing. But before they could move deeper into the darkness, a man appeared. He was tall and slim, with sharp blue eyes. He was wearing a robe and had long silver hair flowing down to his shoulders. "It's good to meet you," he said. "I am the librarian." Bindish, Kaya, and Ilara stepped back as he appeared. They had come to expect protectors, perhaps the Zenata spirits, but not this, a mere man. "Who are you?" Bindish said with some wonder. The librarian smiled gently. "I am the curator of this repository. I am summoned here when needed to ensure that the knowledge contained in these chambers remains intact and that new acquisitions are welcomed properly." Alara couldn't hold it any longer, so she came forward. Her eyes were filled with worry. She was waiting for the right time, but could wait no longer. "Please," she begged, "is there a way, any way, anywhere, to find my children? They were lost in the destruction. I need to know if they are okay." The librarian's eyes tamed with understanding. He shook his head slowly. "I have no special access to find any such people, High Priestess. Time and space are far too vast for that to be possible. However, I know you, Alara, and I have met 2 of your children, or at least I will at a future time." Ilara fought back tears. You know them? They are alive?" "They are," the librarian promised her with a gentle smile. "They are safe and sound, and they have done amazing things." He stopped, his eyes squinting. "And you have a granddaughter, a bright and courageous young woman who carries the spirit of Adheryelon within her heart." Ilara gasped. "A granddaughter?" Hope filled Alara's heart. She was renewed in this information. She would now fight for a better future for her children, who would grow up to do great things and keep— "Thank you," she said, fighting more tears. The librarian nodded. "Hope is empowering, Alara. Never lose it." He looked at the crate. "You have delivered a precious gift. This knowledge from an incredible civilization will be in good hands here, saved for future generations." Bindish raised his head, his heart throbbing with thanksgiving and purpose. "Thank you, librarian. We were ordained to carry out this divine obligation, and we are honored to perform it." The librarian welcomed them further into the library. Bindish, Kaya, and Alara were awed. They entered a dimly lit room with walls filled with shelves hanging almost to the ceiling. Scrolls of parchment and leather-bound tomes with fancy clasps lined the bookshelves, their titles written in the elegant script of tens of thousands of languages. There was a feeling in the air, an aura of centuries-old knowledge permeated the space. They continued through the halls with seemingly never-ending walls, each covered with more bookshelves, parchments, and books, old and new. There were shelves filled with gold scrolls, whose surfaces drew illuminated marks and lit up from within. Others had tablets of polished stone, their scripts scrawled with care. The librarian walked them through this maze of knowledge, his footsteps making a faint noise in the deep rooms. He stopped in front of a solid oak door, the face plain, but it felt calm. "This is the curator's chamber." His voice was low and meek. "Here we will put the things you brought with you so they may be preserved for posterity." They entered a room with natural, indirect light, passing through a window in the stone ceiling. It had a big, polished wooden table, and its surface was smooth. The walls were covered in shelves with space for the scrolls and artifacts. The librarian pointed at the table. "Arrange the items from the crate here," he said. "Take your time." Bindish, Kaya, and Alara laid the crate on the table. It was more than a box of scrolls. It was the drum of their fallen culture's desires. They laid out the contents one by one. "Thank you," Bindish spoke through tears. "Our deepest gratitude is yours, librarian." The librarian smiled gently. "Knowledge is a gift to be passed along, Bindish. This will be the place where your gift is kept." He stopped and surveyed the three exhausted travelers. "Where do you go now?" "Tell me, to your city's wreckage?" Kaya shrugged, her hand placed naturally on her sword. "Our people need us. Others might have survived. We must help them rebuild." Ilara, eyes as sad as they were strong, said yes. "If any of my people are left, I owe it to them to be there. I can do that a little more easily now that I know what you've taught me." "Thank you, librarian." Bindish, however, surprised them both. He looked around the room, astonished. "I would stay here if you would allow it, librarian," he said, a little shaken. "My tired bones cannot withstand the journey home. I would spend my days among all this, and I would learn, preserve, and, maybe, find comfort in my heart." The librarian smiled warmly. "The library is where everybody can come for reading and knowledge, Bindish. You are welcome here as long as you like." With a final goodbye to their companion, Kaya and Alara began to exit the curator's chamber. Before she left, Alara looked around the room. "Librarian," she said, a little reserved, "would you happen to have a parchment and some ink? I need to write something." The librarian smiled sweetly and pointed at a nearby nook. "Of course, Alara. There you'll find what you need." Alara went into the nook where a little writing desk sat. She found paper, ink, and a quill, and, with shaky hands, began her work. She wrote of love for her lost children, sorrow for their lost city, and hopes for the life she hoped they would have. She had let her soul go into the page, a story of strength and a mother's love that lived on despite death and loss. She then folded up the scroll and tied it with a leather string when she was done. Then she removed 2 leather gauntlets from her bag, one with an amber-colored gemstone in the palm, and the other with a jade-colored gemstone. She laid the scroll and the gauntlets on top of the crate, and then, alongside them, with tears pouring down her cheeks, she placed the tiny wooden bird she'd picked up from the playground. "What is that, Ilara?" Bindish asked, himself holding back a frown. "A message," she said in a whisper. "A message for my children, and for their children." She approached the librarian with a request. "Librarian, when my children arrive, will you share this with them?" The librarian responded gently. "I will, Ilara. I promise." Ilara smiled, calm in her sadness. She looked at Kaya and looked more determined than ever. "Let us go, my friend. Our journey continues." And so, at last, saying goodbye, they returned through the stonework and out of the refuge of the Library of the Ages and back into the grasslands. Bindish stood there. He was leaving his new friends, the last traces of the world he knew, but he could see they all had great work ahead of them. He looked up at the high shelves, fingers digging into the spines of old scrolls. He had discovered his destiny as a historian, and as perhaps the guardian of Adheryelon's torch. His burial place would be the Library of the Ages, an oasis of wisdom tucked into the heart of the savannah, proof of the resilience of mankind and knowledge against all adversity. Epilogue, 600 AD, Mauritania, Africa. Millennia passed. The tall grass subsided, sand dunes shifted into its place, empires rose and fell, and the world outside the library changed well beyond recognition. But within the cool, silent depths of the Library of the Ages, time seemed to stand still. The weathered inscription on the cliff face once a beacon for those fleeing a dying civilization, had long since been swallowed by the relentless desert. Yet, the library endured a silent guardian of countless stories, a repository of whispers across time. A low hum resonated through the cavernous chambers one day, breaking the silence. The intricate locking mechanism at the entrance whirred and clicked, the ancient gears aligning in a sequence that hadn't been activated in millennia. The massive stone door creaked open, revealing a sliver of the sun-drenched world beyond. The librarian, his form shimmering into existence, materialized before the entrance. His ancient and wise eyes held a glimmer of anticipation. He knew what this meant. New seekers of knowledge had arrived. He turned and glided through the labyrinthine corridors, his footsteps echoing softly in the stillness. He reached the curator's chamber, where a weathered crate rested upon the polished obsidian table. Atop the crate lay a faded scroll and a pair of leather gauntlets, their stones gleaming softly in the dim light. He gently lifted the scroll and the gauntlets, his fingers tracing the worn leather and the smooth stones. A faint smile touched his lips. "It is time," he murmured, his voice a whisper that echoed through the ages. "The descendants of Adheryelon have returned." He placed the scroll and the gauntlets on a nearby shelf, ready to be presented to the newcomers. Then, he turned towards the entrance, his heart filled with quiet anticipation for the stories that were about to unfold. The Library of the Ages, a timeless sanctuary of knowledge, stood ready to welcome a new generation of seekers, their destinies intertwined with the whispers of the past and the promise of the future.